The knock came at 11:47 p.m., not the polite daytime tap you can ignore, but the kind that sounds like bad news. Try and be brave. I was in my workshop with a flashlight in my hand, oil on my fingers, listening to rain hammer the tin roof. When I opened the door, Linda Cooper stood on my porch, soaked through, clutching a thick envelope like it might keep her afloat. Her voice shook before her body did. I need a husband by tomorrow. Now, if you're thinking, Henry, close the door, you're not wrong. I'm 63, retired, and I've been alone long enough to protect my quiet like it's the last decent thing I own. I didn't need surprises. I didn't need a deadline. But she was standing in the storm, and people don't show up like that unless the ground under them has already started to give way. My name's Henry Walker. I ran freight trains most of my life, coal, grain, whatever needed moving. Then I came home for good when my wife got sick. She's been gone 4 years. Since then I keep an old house in a small Iowa town, with a porch that creaks and a garage workshop where neighbors bring busted tools and I fix them for the price of conversation. Nights are the worst. You hear a distant horn and realize the world still has somewhere to be. Linda lived 3 streets over. 59. School nurse. Widow. I'd seen her in town 100 times, always steady, always kind. Tonight, she looked like someone had run out of options. I stepped aside. Warm air met her like permission. Water ran off her hair onto my mat. She stayed in the entryway, as if the house might reject her. I'm sorry, she said. I know how this sounds. It sounds like you're cold, I told her. Sit down. I'll get a towel. When I came back with a towel and coffee, yes, coffee at midnight, old railroad habits, she kicked off her shoes at the mat, embarrassed by the puddle they left. I caught myself noticing how small that gesture was, like she still believed politeness could save her. I handed her an old flannel shirt to warm up in. She held it for a second and whispered, I'm sorry to bring this into your house. My house has seen worse, I said, and my eyes flicked to the framed photo on the hallway shelf, my wife at the county fair, smiling like the future was guaranteed. I hadn't moved that picture since the funeral, not because I was noble, but because moving it felt like admitting I was still alive. Linda followed my glance and looked away fast, giving me the dignity of not naming what we were both thinking. There's one more thing, she said quietly. The board, they sometimes ask if the couple shares a bedroom. If the story doesn't line up, Mark will pounce. Heat rose in my face, plain embarrassment. We're not doing a show, I said. No, she agreed quick. No. I just need us to be consistent. Real enough that no one can call it a lie. And there it was again, the line between helping and pretending, between protecting someone and losing yourself in the role. She set the envelope on my table with both hands, careful, respectful, like it mattered more than her pride. Then she looked straight at me. I don't need romance, she said. I need a legal husband. 24 hours. There's a meeting tomorrow, guardianship board, attorney, all of it. If I'm not married when we walk in, I lose the house. And my granddaughter's medical coverage. That last part landed hard. I didn't understand the paperwork yet, but I understood the fear. I'd seen that same look in a hospital room when a doctor started talking numbers. She slid the papers toward me. Trust documents. A letter on a law firm's letterhead. A hearing notice. I read slow. The short version. An old family trust tied to her home had a clause that kept benefits in place only if she was married. If she wasn't, control could shift to her late husband's brother, Mark. Mark. Tight handshake. Eyes that never warmed. He's saying I'm unfit, Linda said. Because I took time off work when Emma got sick. He wants the house, and he wants control. He's using the trust like a crowbar. I stared at my kitchen sink, at my single toothbrush in its cup, and felt my first instinct rise up, protect your peace. At my age, peace is expensive. I could already picture the town talk, the smirks, the good for you, Henry, jokes that aren't jokes. I could hear my son asking what I was doing. And then I looked at Linda's hands. She was trying to keep them still by folding them together, like manners could hold panic in place. Something in me shifted, the part that can't watch a thing get crushed just because stopping is inconvenient. So I made my first choice of the night. Not yes. Not no. Just the only honest doorway I had. Tell me everything, I said. And if we do this, there's one rule. Her eyes lifted, wary. No lies between us, I said. Not the kind that rots from the inside. She swallowed. Agreed. She laid out the timeline. Tomorrow afternoon, the board would review the guardianship arrangement for Emma. Mark had filed objections. If Linda didn't present as a stable household, he'd argue the trust should shift power to him. The house would become leverage. Emma would become a file on someone else's desk. What about the courthouse? I asked. We can, she said. But they'll ask where I live. They check sometimes. If the address looks temporary, Mark will call it fraud. I understood what she wasn't saying. A ring wasn't enough. A story wasn't enough. They'd want proof of a shared life. She took a breath, and her voice went quieter. I need to move in. Tonight. That was the second choice, and it was the harder one. Paper I could handle. Paper is ink and stamps. But a person in your house means hearing them in the hallway at 2 a.m. It means someone seeing the chair your wife used to sit in. It means your quiet stopping being yours. My chest tightened. I wanted to say no, not because she didn't deserve help, but because help has a cost, and mine would be the last clean piece of solitude I had. Linda watched my face like she was reading a monitor. I won't touch anything, she said quickly. I'll sleep on the couch. I'll be quiet. I can't show up tomorrow looking like I'm running. Outside, the rain eased to a steady hiss. Somewhere far off, a train horn sounded, long, low, familiar, like the world reminding me I'd spent a lifetime moving other people's freight, and I didn't have much practice moving my own heart. I stood, opened the hall closet, and pulled out a spare blanket. I set it on the couch. Then I went to the front door and turned the deadbolt, the way you do when you know you're choosing something you can't take back. All right, I said. You can stay. Relief hit her, so fast it scared me. She pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes shining. But before she could thank me, I added, tomorrow, when you say my husband in that room, you say it like it's true enough to fight for. Because once we start this, Linda, your brother-in-law won't care what we meant. He'll only care what he can prove. She nodded, and in that moment I understood the real shift. I wasn't just letting a woman out of a rain. I was inviting a whole new life onto my wife's quiet porch, and by morning, the town and a courtroom could be looking straight at my front door. The first thing I saw when I walked into my kitchen was a child's medicine box on my table. Bright colors, cartoon font, the kind of thing that doesn't belong in a widower's quiet house. For a second my heart went sharp, like I'd stepped into the wrong life. Then I remembered Linda Cooper was sleeping on my couch, and by noon we were supposed to look like a married couple with a stable home. If you're watching this thinking, Henry, you're too old for new trouble, I hear you. I made coffee out of habit, the way I used to do on early freight runs, when the world was still dark and you needed something warm to convince your body to move. The percolator hissed, and the house held that in-between silence. No trains close, no voices yet, just rainwater dripping off the porch eaves. I kept my eyes on my hands because if I looked at the couch too long, I'd start thinking about my wife. Then the couch shifted. Linda sat up slowly, wrapped in the spare blanket, my old flannel shirt hanging loose on her shoulders. Her hair was still damp at the ends. She blinked at the room like she was checking if she'd imagined the whole thing. When she saw me, she straightened, embarrassed. Good morning, she said, like she'd stayed the night at a friend's after a storm and not entered into the most complicated agreement either of us had made in years. Coffee? I asked. She nodded, then winced as if nodding cost her pride. Henry, I know you didn't sign up for a pharmacy in your kitchen. I glanced at the box. Whose is that? My granddaughter's, she said. Emma. I picked it up last night. I just grabbed what I needed. There it was, the real reason she'd come to my porch with an envelope. Not the house, not the trust. A little girl who needed medicine on schedule. Linda walked into my kitchen like she was walking on glass, careful not to touch anything. I realized how hard she was trying not to feel like a burden. So I made a choice right then, small but important. I treated her like she belonged. I pulled a second mug down from the cabinet, the one that hadn't had a reason to exist for 4 years, and set it on the counter without making a speech about it. You can put your things wherever, I said. Table, counter, whatever works. Her eyes flicked to the mug, then away. Thank you. We sat with coffee and paperwork. Morning light makes hard facts feel even harder. The trust clause. The board meeting. Mark's objections. And the part that kept gnawing at me. How quickly a family can turn love into a legal weapon. Mark's already called my lawyer twice, Linda said. He's telling everyone I'm manipulating an old man. I snorted before I could stop myself. Old man. You know what I mean. I do, I said, and that's when I felt it. My first real sting of the day. Not fear of court. Fear of being seen as a fool. On the railroad, if people thought you cut corners, they didn't trust you with their lives. Small towns aren't that different. They just use different words. Linda slid out a photo. A little girl with big eyes, sitting in a hospital bed, holding a stuffed rabbit. Emma, she said softly. She's 8. She has a heart condition. Most days she's fine. Then there are days when she's not, and everything depends on coverage, on the right specialist, on me showing up with the right papers. I looked at the photo longer than I meant to. I'd seen that same look once in my own life, in my son's eyes when he was small, and my train schedule kept me away more than I admitted. You're doing the right thing, I said. Linda gave a tired smile. I'm trying. The plan was simple on paper, courthouse, then the board meeting, then breathe again. Simple plans are the ones that break on contact with real people. As we talked, I heard tires on gravel outside, slow, deliberate. A car door shut. Footsteps on my porch. Linda's shoulders tightened. Is that? The knock came, 2 quick raps, like punctuation. I opened the door, and there stood Mrs. Harlan from next door with a plate of cinnamon rolls, raincoat still on. Her eyes went past me, straight to Linda on my couch, like a flashlight finding what it came for. Well, she said, bright as a bell. Morning, Henry. I saw a second car out front and thought you might have finally learned to invite company. My stomach dropped. This was it. Not court. The town's first witness. Linda stood up. She didn't hide. She stepped forward and offered her hand. Linda Cooper, she said. I'm staying here for a bit. Mrs. Harlan's smile widened, the way polite people do when they're storing a story for later. Is that so? I felt the fork in the road inside me, sharp and immediate. I could laugh it off, call it a favor, keep my life safe from talk. Or I could do what I'd told Linda last night, no lies between us, and start acting like we meant it, even if we didn't know what it was yet. So I made my second choice. I kept my voice calm and said, Linda's my fiancée. We're taking care of some family matters. Linda's eyes snapped to mine. Not gratitude, shock. Because I'd just raised the stakes. A fiancé isn't a couch guest. A fiancé is a future, and small towns don't let you borrow that word without interest. Mrs. Harlan blinked once, then beamed. Well, about time. Congratulations. She handed me the plate like she was sealing a deal. You two let me know if you need anything. When she walked back to her car, I watched her through the window. She didn't drive off right away. She sat, phone in hand, thumbs moving. Maybe she was ordering groceries. Maybe she was texting the whole street. Either way, the story had left my house. Linda exhaled. Henry, you didn't have to say that. I did, I said, and surprised myself with how true it felt. Because if we're going to be judged, I'd rather be judged for standing up than for sneaking around. She studied me for a long moment. What if this costs you friends? She asked. I looked at the second mug on the counter, still half full. The house didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like a place that could change. And change is expensive. It might, I said. But I'm more afraid of what it costs me if I don't. She stepped closer, not touching, just close enough for her voice to drop. The courthouse opens at 9, she said. We should go. I nodded, reached for my jacket, and that's when my phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I answered, and a man's voice came through, smooth and cold. Henry Walker, he said. This is Mark Cooper. I hear you have my sister-in-law in your house. Before you do something you'll regret, you should know. I'm filing for an emergency review. And I'm not the one who loses when people start asking questions. I didn't look at Linda while he spoke. Because the moment I did, I'd have to admit we weren't just walking into a courthouse anymore. We were walking into a fight. The first time I heard the joke, it wasn't even said to my face. It drifted up behind me in O'Malley's bar while I was paying for a bowl of chili. Two men laughing the way men laugh when they're trying to sound casual about something mean. Henry finally found himself a payday, one of them said. Must be nice to marry into a house at his age. I froze with my wallet open, bills half out, like my hands didn't know where to go. If you've lived long enough, you know that moment when the room doesn't get louder, but it suddenly feels smaller. I turned around slowly, not because I wanted to fight, but because I wanted to see who was willing to trade my name for entertainment. Don Keller and Pete Roche, both retired, both the kind of guys who'd wave at you in church and still talk about you in the parking lot. Don's smile faltered when he realized I'd heard. Pete lifted his beer like a toast. No offense, Henry, he said. Just saying what everyone's thinking. Everyone. That word can make a grown man feel 12. I'd spent my life around freight crews. Rough talk didn't bother me. What bothered me was the suggestion that I'd sold the last piece of my dignity for a woman's trouble. I paid, carried my bowl to the corner table by the window, and tried to act like it didn't matter. My hands shook just enough that the spoon clicked the ceramic. Then a man slid into the seat across from me without asking. On my way out, I passed the bulletin board by the restrooms, the one with lost dog flyers and church potlucks, and I caught my own reflection in the glass of the beer sign. 63. Shoulders a little lower than they used to be. A face that didn't belong in anyone's gossip. Outside, the air smelled like wet asphalt and cheap smoke. I could have driven straight home, shut the door, and told myself this was Linda's fight, not mine. That was the easy road, and it called to me. Mark Cooper. He looked like his brother used to look in old pictures, same jawline, same confident posture, but the warmth wasn't there. Clean jacket that didn't fit the town. A watch that said he was used to rooms where people listened. He didn't order food. He didn't pretend this was friendly. Henry Walker, he said, like my name was a file he'd already labeled. You're moving fast. I'm eating lunch, I said. He smiled thinly. You're hiding a scheme under a bowl of chili. I respect the simplicity. I kept my voice low. Whatever you think you know, you don't. Mark leaned forward just enough to make it feel like a threat, without being one. Linda is vulnerable, he said. Grief does that. She's clinging to you, because you're safe and convenient. Courts don't care about convenient. They care about truth. And I'm very good at pulling truth out of situations like this. Here's the part where you might expect me to throw him out. But anger isn't always strength. Sometimes it's just noise that gives the other man what he wants. My internal choice came quick and bitter. Do I protect my pride, or do I protect Linda's future? Pride wanted me to stand up, raise my voice, make the room turn toward us. Let everyone see I'm not some old fool being played. But Linda didn't need me to win a moment. She needed me to hold steady. So I stayed seated. You're welcome to believe what you want, I said. But you don't get to rewrite her life to make yourself the hero. Mark's eyes narrowed. Hero. He let out a soft laugh. I'm not trying to be a hero. A child with a serious condition needs stability, money, structure. Not a retired train man playing house. Playing house. There it was, the line meant to cut. Because it wasn't just about me. It was about the fear every older man carries when he steps into something new, that the world will laugh and say you're too late. I set my spoon down. You want to talk about stability? I said. I ran freight through blizzards and derailments. I watched men panic, and I watched men do the right thing. I'm not perfect, but I'm steady. And Linda is the steadiest person I've ever met. Mark's gaze flicked, just for a second, toward the bar where Don and Pete were still watching. He liked the audience. If it's real, he said, prove it. Show the town. Show the board. Bring her to the Founders Fair this weekend. Walk her down Main Street and call her your wife when everyone can hear you. Because if you hide Henry, I'll make sure people assume why. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and placed a business card on my table like a final insult. "I filed for an emergency review," he said. "A private investigator will be around. If you're lying, you'll be exposed." Then he walked out into the daylight like he owned it. I sat there with my chili going cold, hearing the room's quiet return. This wasn't just legal anymore. This was public. And public is where good people get bruised. When I got home, Linda was in the living room, sorting papers into neat stacks, her nurse's handwriting labeling folders like order could keep chaos away. She looked up when I came in and read my face immediately. "He found you," she said. "Yeah," I answered. "You want to show?" Linda's shoulders rose with a tired breath. "We can avoid it," she said. "We don't have to go to the fair. We can stay quiet. That's a thing about decent women. They'll offer you the escape route even when they're drowning, because they don't want to drag you under with them." I stared at the porch through the window, my safe place, my last small stage where no one judged me. And I felt the second internal choice of the day. Do I retreat and keep my name clean, or do I step into the light and let people misunderstand me while I do what's right? I thought about my wife's last months, how fear can make you shrink your life down to a room and call it survival. I thought about Emma's photo on the fridge, like she already belonged here. And I thought about Linda, who'd spent years tending other people's wounds and was still trying not to be a burden. I turned to her. "We're going," I said. Her eyes widened. "Henry, we're going to the Founders Fair," I repeated steady. "We're going to walk down Main Street, and if anyone asks, I'll tell them the truth. You're my wife, and I'm standing beside you." Linda's mouth opened, then closed. In the silence, you could hear the old house settle around us, like it was listening. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just nodded once, the way a person nods when they accept that the next step will cost something. That night my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One sentence, no greeting. "See you at the fair. Don't disappoint the cameras." I stared at the screen until it dimmed, and for the first time since Linda knocked on my door, I understood the real risk. Not losing the house. Losing our peace, because once a town decides you're a story, it doesn't let you be quiet again. The first thing I saw when I got home was a note taped to my front door, neat handwriting, one strip of clear tape, the kind of careful touch Linda used when she didn't want to leave a mark. I stood there with my keys in my hand, staring at that white square, as if it might change its mind. You ever notice how a house can look the same and still feel abandoned? That's what hit me first. The note was short. "Henry, I'm going to my sister's for a few days. I can't be the reason they drag you through this. I'll call after the hearing. Thank you. Linda." Inside, the couch was made. The second mug was washed and put away. Even the little medicine box was gone from my kitchen table, leaving a pale rectangle where it had sat. Silence filled the rooms like cold water. Part of me wanted to call it a favor, saved me from gossip, from court, from being a small-town headline. But another part, the part one hadn't heard in years, kept saying, "You didn't invite trouble. You invited a person." The hearing was the next morning. I drove to the courthouse early and sat in my truck with my hands on the steering wheel like I was waiting for a signal. The fair had been a mess, photos, whispers, Mark's investigator hovering like a shadow. Linda had still walked beside me down Main Street with her chin up. Now she'd chosen distance, and I couldn't blame her. Inside the courthouse, the air smelled like old paper and floor cleaner. Linda sat with her lawyer on one side. Mark sat on the other, dressed like he belonged somewhere bigger than our town. Linda looked at me once, quick, as if asking, "Are you angry?" I made my choice before my feet even moved. I walked over and sat behind her. No scene, no touch, just close enough to say without words, "I'm here." Her shoulders lowered a fraction. The board members asked about Emma's care plan, school schedules, medical appointments. Then they asked about the marriage, not with curiosity, but with a checklist. Address. Utilities. Who cooks? Who pays what? Mark's lawyer pushed harder, calling it an arrangement, as if our whole life could fit in a sneer. I felt my jaw tighten. I could stay quiet and let the lawyers talk, protect my pride by not explaining myself to strangers. Or I could speak and hand my private life to people who cared only about credibility. That was my internal choice, pride or Linda. When they asked if I wanted to make a statement, I stood. "I'm Henry Walker," I said, voice steady because the railroad taught me how to speak when my stomach is doing cartwheels. I retired after 40 years running freight. I'm not rich. I'm not chasing anything. I married Linda because I saw a good woman cornered by paperwork, and because her granddaughter is real. Mark's lawyer smiled like he'd won. "So you admit it's for paperwork. Paperwork can be a cage," I said. "A cage is still real. Emma's needs are real. Linda's home is real. And if fast means fake, then every emergency room is a lie." A board member asked, "Do you consider this marriage genuine, Mr. Walker?" That question hung there. Too big, too personal. Linda's eyes flicked to mine, not pleading for romance, pleading for accuracy. "I consider it honest," I said. "We don't lie to each other. We're building something stable. Maybe it started fast. Fast doesn't always mean false." The hearing ended with that awful phrase, "We'll notify you," the kind that follows you into sleep. Outside, Linda's lawyer said the board seemed receptive. Mark said nothing until he passed me and murmured, low and clean, "When this ends, she'll leave. And you'll be the fool who let her in." Linda heard him. I saw it in her face. In the parking lot, she spoke first. "He's right about one thing," she said quietly. "This is hurting you." "It's hurting both of us," I answered. She shook her head. "You had a quiet life. I brought a storm." Here was the next choice. I could agree, let her go to her sister's, and return to my routine like a decent man who helped and stepped away. Or I could fight for the space we'd made, even if it meant more eyes on my porch. "You didn't bring a storm," I said. "You brought a reason to stand up. If you leave because you're afraid of gossip, that's Mark winning." Her voice dropped. "I'm not leaving because of gossip. I'm leaving because I'm scared of needing you." That hit harder than any insult, because it was my fear too. On the drive home from the courthouse, I kept seeing Don Keller's grin from a bar, hearing that word payday like a coin dropped on concrete. At a red light, I caught my own face in the rearview mirror and thought, "You're 63, Henry. You're supposed to know how endings work." But the truth is, endings are the one thing life never teaches you cleanly. They just happen, and you live in the mess they leave behind. Back at the house, I walked through each room like I was doing an inspection. Old railroad habit, check the doors, check the windows, check what can fail. In my workshop, the scent of oil and sawdust usually calmed me, but that day it made me think of my wife's last winter, how we tried to keep normal life running while the world fell apart behind closed curtains. I opened a drawer I hadn't touched since the funeral. Her apron was there, folded. My hand hovered over it. I didn't throw it away. I slid it to the back and made space. Like making room was the only brave thing I could manage. Then I stood there, ashamed of how much I missed her noise. That night my house was quiet again. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the pale rectangle where her medicine box had been. Calling her would be easy. Doing nothing would be safer. But safe was starting to feel like another word for alone. So I made one more choice. I taped a blank index card to the fridge with a magnet and wrote, in my rough handwriting, "Emma's meds, 7 a.m., 7 p.m. Nothing poetic, just practical. If Linda came back, I wanted her to see she wasn't a guest in my life. She was part of the schedule. At 9:12 p.m., headlights swept across my living room wall. A car door shut. The knock was soft this time, no emergency, no storm, just a person. When I opened the door, Linda stood there holding a small cardboard box. No suitcase. Just photographs and children's drawings. "I didn't bring clothes," she said. "I brought this. If you still want us to look like a home." Behind her, the night was calm. Inside my house, the fridge card waited. And for the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like safety. It felt like something I was finally willing to share. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday that felt too normal for the decision it carried. It sat in my mailbox like junk, plain white, official stamp, my name typed clean. I stood on my porch with it and didn't open it right away. At 63, you learn a trick. You don't rush into news. News will still be news 30 seconds later, and your heart appreciates the courtesy. You might think the hard part was the courthouse, the gossip, Mark's threats. It wasn't. The hard part was realizing the fight could end, and I'd still have to decide what kind of man I was when the noise stopped. Linda was inside, humming while she wiped down the counter. On the fridge, my handwritten card still held its place. Emma's meds. 7 a.m., 7 p.m. She'd added one below it in her neat nurse script. Call cardiology Friday. 2 handwritings. One life that had started to feel shared. I tore the envelope open and read the first line twice before it sank in. The board upheld the guardianship. The trust benefits stayed in place. The house would remain Linda's. Emma's coverage would continue. There it was. The word we'd all been chasing. Confirmed. My knees went weak, not from fear, but from relief, so sudden it felt like dizziness. I leaned on the porch railing and stared out at my yard, at the driveway where my wife used to park crooked, because she said straight lines were for people with time. I realized I'd been holding my breath for days. When I walked back in, Linda looked up and knew instantly. "Is it?" she asked. I held up the letter. "We did it," I said. She didn't cry the way movies show it. She just folded forward, like her body finally let go of something heavy. Then she laughed once, quiet and shaky, and I felt that sound land in my house like sunlight. For a minute we just stood there in the kitchen, 2 older people in an ordinary room, trying to understand that the emergency had loosened its grip. If the story ended right there, it would be tidy. But life doesn't stop at tidy. That afternoon, Mark called my cell like he still had a key to my day. "Congratulations," he said. "You got your little win." His tone made win sound dirty. But remember this, Henry, the town forgets court rulings. It remembers rumors. When she leaves, they'll say I told you so. I could have hung up. Instead, I heard my own voice come out calm. Maybe. But Emma won't remember rumors. She'll remember who showed up. Mark went quiet. Then the line went dead. I stood in my garage afterward, surrounded by tools I'd fixed for other people, and realized how easy it would be to fix my reputation by backing away now. No more whispers. No more investigators. Just the old routine and the old silence. And for the first time, that deal sounded like a punishment, not a reward. Linda set the letter down carefully. "Henry," she said, and her voice had that tone nurses use when they're about to tell you something that matters. "Now that it's settled, you're free." Free. The word hit me wrong. Free from what? I asked, though I knew. "From me," she said softly. "From this marriage, if you want it. The board won't punish me now. Mark can't touch the trust clause anymore. If you want an annulment or a divorce, we can do it clean. No one has to lose anything because of me." There was my internal choice, plain as a switch. One path. End it, return to my quiet, keep my heart protected. The other. Keep a woman in my home when there was no longer a legal reason. Keep risking loss, because at my age loss has teeth. I didn't answer right away. I rinsed my mug that was already clean, just to give my hand something to do. Linda watched me, patient, but I could see the fear under her patience. The fear wasn't that I'd reject her help. It was that I'd confirm what she'd spent years believing, that she was temporary everywhere. "I'm not a young man," I said finally. "I don't like surprises." "I know," she whispered. "And I don't like being a headline," I added. Her mouth tightened. "I'm sorry." I turned around and leaned back against the counter. "But I also don't like the house sounding empty," I said. "And lately it hasn't." Linda's eyes went shiny, but she blinked it back. "Henry, you don't owe me a life." That word, "oh," was the poison Mark tried to pour into everything. As if kindness always comes with a receipt. I shook my head. "I didn't marry you because I owed you," I said. "I married you because I chose you. First as a person who needed help. Then as a person I started to trust in my kitchen at midnight." She let out a breath like it had been trapped for months. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of court anymore. Of settling in, and then being told I should have known better." I nodded because I understood. "I'm scared too," I said. "Not of Mark. Of waking up one day and realizing I let myself need someone again, and then losing them." We moved to the porch that evening, 2 mugs of coffee in our hands even though it was late. The sky was clear, the kind of Iowa dusk that makes you believe the world is gentler than it is. A train horn sounded far off, low and steady. For the first time, it didn't feel like life leaving me behind. It felt like background music. Linda spoke first. I can redraw everything, she said. We can put it in writing. The house stays mine. You keep yours. I can make sure you don't lose anything, even if one day you decide you're done. The practical part of me loved her for that. The lonely part of me hated that she still thought she had to negotiate her right to stay. I don't want promises we can't keep, I said. Not at this age. She nodded. Me, neither. So here's what I can promise, I said. Not forever. Just today. We don't make choices out of fear. And once a year, on this day, we sit right here and we tell each other the truth. Do we still want this? She stared at me like she was seeing the outline of a life she could actually live in. A yearly check-in, she said, half laughing. Railroad men like schedules, I told her. After a while, she said, Emma asked about you today. My chest tightened. What did she say? She said, is Henry still our family, or was he just for the scary part? I swallowed hard. What did you tell her? Linda looked at me, and this time she didn't look like a woman asking for rescue. She looked like a woman offering a place. I told her, she said, family is who stays when the scary part ends. The porch light buzzed once, then steadied. I reached over, not to grab, not to claim, just to rest my hand on the arm of her chair, close enough to be felt. Then I guess I'm still here, I said. And if you're wondering what the luxury is at 63, I'll tell you. It's not a second youth. It's waking up in a house where someone sets a second cup on the table like it belongs there, and leaves a toothbrush in your bathroom without asking permission.